The agenda this week assessed calls for paid sick leave and debated the merits of political parties in Canadian democracy. The agenda's Week in Review begins examining the province's vaccine rollout.
77.9% of available vaccine doses in Ontario were actually used by the end of last week. 77.9%, which means there's almost a quarter of the doses that are still sitting in a freezer somewhere, presumably, and have not yet been used. Why would that be?
So I think there's a couple things to note there. So first of all, if you look on any given day of how many vaccines haven't been administered as compared to those that have been delivered, we have to look at when those vaccines were actually delivered. We're getting those in weekly shipments. So of course, if we receive 1 million doses yesterday, then it wouldn't be surprising to see a gap of 1 million doses today. The other thing that's worth noting is that we see constant delays in vaccines, unexpected delays of when they're actually going to arrive into the province. And that means that if we don't get the vaccines on Monday and they end up coming on Thursday, that we'll have 300,000 or 400,000 vaccination appointments that will not be able to be honored. And so having around 3 days of vaccines to be able to use for those in case there is a delay is prudent. And that, given that we're doing around 100,000 vaccines a day, would end up being around 300,000 vaccines if we wanted 3 days contingency. The other thing that I'll note is that that figure of 77.9%, while it does show that there is a gap between that and 100%, it is the second highest administration across the entire country of all provinces and territories, save for Saskatchewan, and is comparable to that in the United States, which is a paragon for vaccination administration.
So don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative.
Well, I think we need to look at what's feasible. Absolutely, we want to be vaccinating as many people as we possibly can and administering every single dose that we get. But if we want to look to Ontario to say, are we failing as a province, I would say this appears to be the norm across every other province and territory, every other state in the United States, and every other jurisdiction that is doing this.
All right, let's move on to the Ontario Liberal leader, Stephen Del Duca. He had a news conference earlier today in which he called for all education workers, period, full stop, not just those in hot zones, but everyone, to be vaccinated. And the thinking was you could get it done this week because, of course, this is March break week. Even though it's not March, it's April, but it's March break week. This is the week the kids are off. When it comes to, Marie, I'll get you to start on this one. When it comes to protecting teachers, students, caretakers, principals, everybody in the school system, what's the best way to do it now?
I think this is a great opportunity to use empty schools to vaccinate teachers. We've seen that work in other provinces and also across the U.S. as well. I am concerned about the length of time that it's taken to get vaccines to teachers, given that there isn't a province-wide policy for schools to be closed right now. So this is very, very concerning, especially in the context of this exploding number of variants of concern. We're starting to see that that is affecting children in other areas, in Israel and Italy, across the U.S. as well. And so I don't think we can sort of look at the data and say, historically, throughout the past year, SARS-CoV-2 hasn't affected children, so that's okay, we're not going to prioritize schools. Right now, we have a pandemic of variants. So it is really, really important that we focus on teachers and everyone else that works in a school.
Sabina, is it possible to get everybody during this week when the schools are shut down, to get everybody who needs a vaccination vaccinated?
Okay, so the virus works 24/7. It does not take a break. And so our response has to be immediate. It has to be urgent. Every vaccine that's sitting in a freezer right now that is not going in someone's arm is a life that could be saved. So absolutely, we should be doing everything. We should be having 24/7 clinics, and we need to be vaccinating as fast as we can.
All right, let's move on to long-term care. You may know the National Post columnist, Financial Post columnist Diane Francis, who did a piece recently on whether the vaccine should be mandatory for those working in hospital and long-term care homes. And here's a little of what she wrote a few days back in the Financial Post. She wrote, "Governments cannot allow worker rights to trump patient rights. All public-facing healthcare providers should be required to be vaccinated under the threat of termination. Care homes should also require all staff and contractors to be vaccinated as a condition of their employment. The healthcare system is supposed to look after the sick and the vulnerable, but it can't do that if reckless medical professionals are exposing patients to COVID-19. Okay, Maxwell, do you agree or disagree with what she has suggested ought to be done here?
Yeah, I think mandates for vaccines can be ethically justified. Of course, we have them for schools in Ontario. When I worked in hospitals, I had to show that I was vaccinated against certain pathogens. I think that we need to certainly think about the balancing between public health benefits and individual freedoms.
You just heard Premier Ford say, we don't need to do that. There's already a federal program in place, still with $750 million in place. Who's right here?
I think that we just have to clearly say that the Premier is wrong here. There are so many differences between that program and paid sick leave. To apply for the CSRB, it takes 7 steps between applying for it and getting it. If you have paid sick leave, there's 1 step. You call in sick, your paycheck doesn't change. And I think it's really important to reinforce here that this is a workforce that is low wage and cannot afford either the uncertainty, which accompanies that federal benefit in terms of you're not sure whether you'll get it or not, and also can't afford the wait times. So those are 2 crucial differences between the federal benefit and paid sick leave that make it less likely that people are going to access it. And we have very good proof of how that's not happening. The Premier himself stated that there is still $700 million left there, and we are still seeing huge amounts of transmission of the virus in workplaces. So I really think we need to take a different approach, and we really need public policy to put no barriers in between people's ability to take care of their health, to take care of the health of their coworkers and the public at large.
Let me just clarify a couple of things. One of the allegations that has been made is that there's still $750 million in this federal sick leave fund because it's undersubscribed. People think it's too difficult to get, so they don't apply for it. True or false?
Yes, that is true in terms of the estimate of the amount of take-up is the estimated the take-up rate, my apologies, the take-up rate is much slower than had been expected. And what we assume is that the difficulties in accessing it and the uncertainties associated with it are the reason for that.
Now, Marcy, one of the reasons that Premier Ford has been reluctant to bring in the kind of sick days policy that Sheila just enunciated is that he thinks business are already suffering enough and that they cannot be expected to take on the financial responsibility of yet another program when they're already on the edge of a cliff. What's your view on that?
Well, certainly, I mean, we're in a new terrain here, Steve, right? Like COVID, the realities that COVID has laid on government, they have to balance the protection of human life as well as fairly support businesses who, again, have been making incredible sacrifices throughout this pandemic and have been hit, some of the hardest after, those who lost their lives. And I think that what everybody wants is consistency, and it's simply to know what supports they have, what parameters business can work within, what's on the horizon. If government chooses to support paid sick leave, then, business can factor that into their plans. But really, it's all about consistency and consistency in our approach to keep people safe and when the time is right to really reopen the economy.
But Daniel, I presume before the pandemic hit, if you were sick, you called into your employer and you said, I can't come in today, and you would still get your salary, and the business in question would be responsible for paying that salary. We're post-pandemic now, or into the pandemic now. Is it your view that the expense of paying for sick days for employees who can't come in because they don't want to infect their colleagues at the workplace, in your view, who should pay for that now?
Look, Steve, ensuring people during a pandemic can afford to stay home is both, it's a really important point. It's both morally the right thing to do and it's economically sound as well. And when a worker protects themselves, they're protecting their colleagues, they're protecting their employer, they're safeguarding the business and the community by extension. So our position on this is that businesses, particularly small businesses, simply cannot afford the additional financial responsibility to fund sick leave at this time, which is why we support the notion of a temporary paid sick program that is paid for by government. And Sheila just now did a great job of explaining what some of the shortcomings are of the federal benefit program. But just as other programs and benefits that have been rolled out over the last year have been tweaked and improved or amended to fill in the gaps, we don't see any reason why the very same can't be applied in this instance as well. And so, we hope to see both the province and the federal government, work together to explore, either a reform of the current benefit or the implementation of additional support so that when people can stay home, when people need to stay home, they're able to do so safely and they don't need to choose between, following public health orders and being able to put food on the table.
Without a party system, people don't know who they should vote for, and they don't know who's accountable for what. And so let's take the first piece of it. All of the data I've ever seen indicates that about 5% of Canadians really vote on the basis of their local candidate. And that tends to be in rural areas where people know their local candidate. In most parts of the country, people don't even know who the candidates for the parties are. They vote either for the leader or for the policy program of the party. And that is how all of what's going on is decoded for them so that they can make a choice about what they want. Then similarly, if I'm in Toronto and I don't like what's going on, can I blame John Tory for that? He's one vote on the council. The accountability is so obscure, I don't know who to blame. Whereas in a partisan system, when I'm unhappy with the government, I know exactly whose neck to choke. And so I think for those two reasons, Susan's done a lot more thinking and research about this than I have. But I have trouble seeing how it would work and whether it would be desirable for it to work.
Okay, we'll get some more feedback on this and then let Susan respond to what she's hearing. Sean, you're a guy who back in the day spent some time in partisan politics working for Conservatives. Can you imagine a political system in Canada that doesn't involve partisan politics?
Well, the short answer is no. I think that this conversation about problems or weaknesses in our democracy is terribly important. But I'm not sure the solution is to discard parties. In fact, I think there's a persuasive argument, in fact, that we ought to have more parties. That one of the problems with the current system is that these large brokerage parties aren't bringing expression to large minorities in our country, whether it's hardcore progressives, whether it's pro-life voices, whether it's those who have misgivings about Canada's immigration system and yet can't find expression in our current mainstream politics. So I could go on, Steve, but I think in short, I've increasingly come to view, and this has been through a kind of period of introspection, prompted in large part by the rise of political populism, which is obviously has various complicating factors, but at some level represents a kind of rejection of the lack of representativeness and responsiveness of modern democracy. And for me, it's made me more of a small d Democrat, and in turn, I think increasingly persuaded by the need for something like proportional representation, which would not lead to fewer parties. It would actually lead to more parties. It would be a less efficient and messier politics, but ultimately a more representative and responsive one. And for me, that's one of the major takeaways of the political disruption of the past several years.
David Moskrop, where are you on this?
Well, if parties didn't exist, you would have to invent them for reasons that David outlined. And incidentally, I happen to agree with Sean on proportional representation. I would love to see some socialists in legislatures. Our parties are all fundamentally liberal, and that does I think, close out a lot of debate that we should legitimately be having. But if you look at the history of jurisdictions who have tried to do away with parties or to sort of mitigate their force, parties creep back up anyway. The United States is a good example of this. The framers of the Constitution in the United States were weary of what they called factions. They didn't love the idea of parties, but parties crept in anyway because they perform the functions that David talked about, which is they sort of consolidate voices and they allow for accountability. And so the parties form a necessary part of our system. I don't think parties are the fundamental problem. I think parties done poorly is the problem. I think parties that are too leader-centric, parties that are fundamentally identitarian and toxic because of it, they perform a sort of toxic identitarian partisan role rather than a sort of partisan sorting role. And they end up being anti-democratic in that way, are part of the problem. We could do parties better. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be, can we imagine a different sort of party system that works and includes people and is more functional? And I think we can. So I do think we need party reform, but I don't think we should do away with them, nor do I think we could, because they would just sort of reform anyway.
That's just some of what we covered this week on The Agenda. For more, including the full conversations, you can visit our website, tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.